If I please you tonight, will you make me yours forever? Secret of a young Apache woman. Every morning, the sun rose over the horizon, painting golden streaks on the land, and the young Apache woman would wake with it, carrying the weight of her family's expectations and the gentle warmth of the world around her. Her life had always been a balance between duty and curiosity. From a young age, she had learned that her actions reflected not just on herself, but on her family, her tribe, and the generations that had come before her. She was taught to respect the land, honor her elders, and cherish the traditions that had shaped her people for centuries. Her days were filled with small, meaningful tasks. She helped her mother prepare food, weaving herbs and spices into meals that carried the stories of their ancestors. She accompanied her father when he went hunting, learning to track animals by the marks they left on the earth. She watched the sky at night, studying the stars and learning the tales that had been passed down through generations. These were not just stories, they were lessons, maps, and reminders of where she came from. Yet, even in the safety of routine, her mind wandered. She wondered about the world beyond the mountains, the people who lived in faraway towns, and the lives they led. There was a part of her that longed for something more, something beyond the hills and rivers she had always known. The young woman had always been careful with her feelings. In her culture, emotions were respected but measured. To speak too freely of love or desire could bring misunderstanding or shame, and yet her heart had a mind of its own. She had noticed the young man when he came to their village. He was not from their people, but he carried himself with kindness and respect. He did not speak loudly or demand attention. Instead, he observed, listened, and understood. Their eyes met on many occasions, at the market, by the river, during festivals, and each time, a silent connection grew stronger. It was a connection that did not need words to exist, but the young woman felt it deeply in the quiet moments of her day. She would find herself thinking of him when she walked through the fields, imagining what it would be like to speak freely, to share her dreams and fears. But fear always followed. Fear of breaking rules, fear of disappointing her parents, fear of stepping into a path she could not return from. Her heart said one thing, her mind said another, and she often felt as though she were standing between two worlds. The world of her people, with its rules and traditions, was safe and familiar. The world beyond, or even just this connection with the young man, was uncertain and thrilling, and that uncertainty both excited and frightened her. One afternoon, as the sun began to dip behind the mountains, she found herself sitting by the river, the water reflecting the colors of the sky. She thought of her mother's words, "A woman's strength is in her patience and her wisdom. Listen to your heart, but do not let it blind you." She had tried to follow these words her whole life, but now her heart seemed louder than ever. It whispered questions she was not ready to ask aloud. Could she trust someone outside her family? Could someone truly understand the traditions she held dear? Could love and loyalty exist together without causing pain? Her interactions with the young man remained brief but meaningful. He would greet her with a respectful nod or a gentle smile, and though the words were few, the meaning behind them was profound. He asked about her days, listened when she spoke, and shared small pieces of his own life without overwhelming her. She noticed his sincerity, the way he carried himself with respect for the people and the land. It was different from anything she had experienced. There was no rush, no pressure, only patience and understanding. Each encounter left her heart racing, but it also left her thoughtful. She wondered if a bond could grow in silence and if trust could be built without the world knowing. At night, she would lie awake, the sounds of the village quieting around her, and imagine the possibilities. She imagined walking with him through the hills, talking about the stars and the stories they carried. She imagined sharing her laughter, her fears, and her hopes without worrying about judgment. And yet, the question that lingered in her mind was always the same. Could she let herself hope for something that might never be? Could she risk her heart for a connection that might not be returned in the way she longed for? Even as she wrestled with these questions, she remained grounded in her daily life. She respected her elders, helped her family, and continued learning the ways of her people. She attended ceremonies and festivals, where the music, dance, and storytelling reminded her of the strength and beauty of her heritage. In these moments, she felt pride and belonging, but also a quiet tension. Her dreams were not wrong, nor were her traditions. Yet they seemed to pull her in different directions, and she was determined to find a path that honored both. One evening, during a gathering of the tribe, she watched the flames of a fire dance in the darkness, the faces of her people illuminated in orange light. She felt a strange mixture of peace and longing. The fire reminded her of the warmth of home, the safety of tradition, and the power of history. But it also reminded her of the questions she had yet to answer, the choices she had yet to make. The young man was there too, on the edge of the circle, respectful and observant. Their eyes met across the firelight, and she felt the pull of something unspoken. It was a silent understanding that something important had begun, something that neither could name yet, but both felt in their hearts. As the night grew quiet and people returned to their homes, she stayed near the river, the water reflecting the moonlight. She thought about the future, about the balance between love and duty, curiosity and caution. She realized that life would not give her easy answers. She would have to choose to risk, to trust, and to grow. But for the first time, she felt that she had the strength to do so. She felt the first flicker of courage, the quiet beginning of a journey that would test her heart and her wisdom. In the end, the young Apache woman understood that her life was about more than following rules or seeking safety. It was about learning who she was, what she valued, and how she could honor both her heart and her heritage. The questions she held in her heart were not simple, but they were hers, and she knew that one day she would face them fully. For now, she watched the moonlight on the river, feeling a mixture of fear, hope, and excitement. She felt the beginnings of a story that was uniquely hers, a story of strength, love, and the courage to ask questions that mattered. And though the words had not yet been spoken, the question lingered quietly in her mind, a whisper on the wind, a secret she held close. Could she give her heart to someone outside her world, and could that love become a bond strong enough to last a lifetime? The young woman did not know the answer yet, but she knew the journey had begun, and that was enough to keep her moving forward. Days passed slowly in the village, each one carrying the rhythm of life that had existed for generations. The young Apache woman continued her routines, helping her family with daily chores, gathering herbs, and learning the stories of the elders. But her thoughts were rarely at peace. She found herself thinking about the young man more often, wondering what he was thinking, whether he felt the same quiet connection she did. Their meetings remained brief and full of meaning, each smile, each glance carrying words that neither spoke aloud. One afternoon, she found herself walking through a field of wildflowers, the sunlight dancing on the petals and warming her skin. The young man appeared at the edge of the field, as if he had been waiting for her. They did not speak at first. They simply walked side by side, listening to the wind and the soft rustling of grass beneath their feet. In that silence, she felt a sense of understanding, a feeling that words could not capture. There was trust in his presence, a gentle patience that made her heart feel safe. She remembered her mother's words about patience and wisdom. "Do not rush your heart," her mother had said. "A bond built too quickly may not last. Watch, listen, and learn first." The young woman realized that her heart had already begun to speak, quietly and steadily, but she would not allow it to speak too loudly. She wanted to know him, not just as a visitor in their village, but as someone who understood and respected her people and traditions. Their conversations were simple but meaningful. He would ask her about her day, about the stories she had heard from elders, about the plants she used for medicine. She would ask him about his travels, about the people and places he had seen, and sometimes about his thoughts and dreams. Each conversation built a bridge between them, slowly and carefully, with respect and care. She noticed how he listened, not just to her words but to the pauses, the quiet moments, the unspoken thoughts she did not yet dare to share. The young woman struggled with her feelings. She wanted to trust him completely, to share her hopes and fears, but the fear of disappointment or betrayal held her back. She remembered other young women in the village whose hearts had been hurt by promises that were not kept, by trust that was broken. She wondered if she could risk herself in the same way, if she could allow herself to hope for something beyond the life she had always known. Despite her caution, there were moments of joy. They laughed together when small accidents happened, like when a basket of berries spilled or when a playful wind tossed leaves in their hair. She noticed how he treated her with kindness and respect, never rushing her, never demanding more than she was ready to give. He did not try to impress her with grand gestures or empty words. Instead, he was consistent, thoughtful, and patient. It was in these small moments that she felt the stirrings of hope. Perhaps, she thought, someone could care for her heart without breaking it. At night, she would sit by the river, reflecting on their time together. The moonlight shimmered on the water, and she imagined what it would be like to speak freely, to share her deepest thoughts and secrets. She realized that love was not just about attraction or desire. It was about trust, understanding, and commitment. And she wanted all of those things, but she was also afraid. She knew that love could be fragile, and that her heart was not something to be given lightly. One evening, during a quiet moment near the edge of the village, the young man spoke more openly than before. He told her of his respect for her people, for their traditions, and for the strength he saw in her. He spoke of admiration, not just for her beauty, but for her courage, her intelligence, and her careful consideration of the world around her. She listened, her heart pounding, yet she remained careful. She wanted to believe his words, to trust him, but she also needed to see that his actions would match his promises. The young woman began to notice how her feelings influenced her daily life. She found herself smiling more often, thinking of him during her tasks, and imagining the possibility of a shared future. At the same time, she reminded herself of the importance of balance. She could not let her heart distract her from her responsibilities or her respect for her people. Each day was a lesson in patience, in observing, in learning to read the signs of trust and sincerity. She also began to see how her connection with him affected the village around her. Some elders watched quietly, noting her growing attention to the young man. Some younger women whispered about possibilities, curiosity sparking in their eyes. Yet the young woman remained grounded. She did not seek approval, nor did she ignore guidance. She was learning that relationships required not only feelings but wisdom, and that love could only grow when nurtured with respect and care. As time passed, she began to understand the importance of small gestures. A helping hand, a shared meal, a moment of listening. These became the foundation of trust. The young man did not try to rush her or force declarations of love. He simply showed up, consistently and genuinely, proving that his interest was sincere. She realized that his patience was not a sign of weakness or hesitation, but of understanding and respect. And in this understanding, her heart began to soften. The young woman also reflected on her own growth. She had learned to balance curiosity with caution, hope with wisdom. She saw the value in observing the actions of those around her, in reading the quiet moments, in listening to the heart without letting it overpower reason. She realized that trust was built over time, that bonds were strengthened by patience, and that love was most meaningful when it was freely given and honored with respect. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, casting golden light over the village, she felt a shift within herself. She was no longer just a girl observing the world. She was a young woman learning to navigate the complexities of heart and duty. She understood that her feelings for the young man were not simple, but they were real. She also understood that they were not hers alone. They were part of a larger story, a story of growth, courage, and the careful building of trust. And in that quiet moment, standing in the warm glow of the evening, she felt the beginnings of a question forming in her heart. It was not a question she could yet speak aloud, not a thought she could yet share. But it was there, quietly, persistently, a whisper of hope and fear intertwined. Could she trust this young man with her heart? Could a bond formed in patience and respect become something lasting, something true? She did not know the answer, but she knew that the journey toward it had already begun, and that she would face it with courage, wisdom, and the quiet strength that had always guided her. In these days, she realized that love and trust were not about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. They were about consistency, respect, and the willingness to grow together. She began to see that the connection she felt with the young man was more than fleeting attraction. It was a meeting of minds, hearts, and values. It was a bond that could withstand uncertainty, challenge, and distance if nurtured with patience and care. And so she continued her days, balancing work, family, and the quiet presence of the young man in her thoughts. She learned to enjoy the small moments, to treasure the shared silences, and to appreciate the gestures that spoke louder than words. She understood that love was not a force to be demanded, but a choice to be honored and respected. And in this understanding, she felt a quiet hope, a hope that one day she might be able to ask the question her heart longed to speak, and that the answer, whatever it might be, would be met with honesty, respect, and truth. The young Apache woman had begun to realize that patience was not just waiting, but preparing her heart, her mind, and her spirit for the possibility of love that could be lasting and true. She understood that actions mattered more than words, that respect mattered more than desire, and that a bond built on understanding and care could withstand time, challenge, and uncertainty. And as the stars began to shine above the mountains, she felt a quiet strength within her. She knew that her heart had taken its first steps toward trust, that her feelings were growing carefully, and that she had the wisdom to continue this journey without losing herself. The young man's presence was no longer just a curiosity. It was a part of her life, a gentle influence guiding her toward understanding, connection, and the possibility of something lasting and true. The days continued, each one filled with learning, observation, and shared moments. And while the question in her heart remained unspoken, it was growing stronger, shaping her thoughts, actions, and hopes. She was ready, quietly and steadily, to see where this bond could lead, and to discover whether love, trust, and respect could indeed become a promise of forever. The night was quiet, with only the soft sound of the wind moving through the trees and the distant call of owls. The young Apache woman walked along the familiar path that led to the river, her mind heavy with thoughts she had long tried to keep hidden. This night felt different from the others. There was a tension in the air, a sense that something important was about to happen. The young man had asked to meet her, and though he had given no details, she sensed that the moment would demand courage, honesty, and clarity from both of them. As she approached the riverbank, she saw him waiting, standing in the soft moonlight. The reflection of the moon danced on the water, creating a shimmering path that seemed to lead directly to him. Her heart quickened, but she took a deep breath, reminding herself to remain calm, observant, and strong. This was a test of more than feelings. It was a test of understanding, patience, and the careful balance between heart and duty. He greeted her with a gentle smile, the kind that did not need words to communicate warmth and respect. She returned the smile, though her heart was pounding with anticipation. For a moment, they stood silently, listening to the gentle flow of the river and the rustle of the trees around them. It was in this silence that the young woman realized how much trust had been built over the past weeks, how much they had come to understand one another without needing to rush or demand explanations. Finally, he spoke, his voice soft but steady. "I know we have spent time together in quiet ways, learning about each other, sharing moments without words," he said. "I have come tonight because I want to be honest with you. I want to know if you trust me enough to let me be part of your life, not just for a moment, but in a way that matters, in a way that lasts." Her breath caught at his words. She had thought about this moment many times, imagining what she might say, how she might respond, and what it would feel like to ask the question that had been growing in her heart. She realized that the moment was finally here. It was no longer a thought or a whisper. It was real, present, and demanding attention. She had to choose to speak and to face the truth of her feelings. Gathering her courage, she finally asked the question that had remained unspoken in her heart for so long. "If I please you tonight," she said softly, "will you make me yours forever?" The words hung in the air, fragile and weighty at the same time. She spoke them not with expectation but with hope. She spoke them not as a demand, but as a question seeking honesty, respect, and clarity. Her eyes searched his, looking for the truth that words alone could not always convey. He paused, taking a moment to consider her words. The young woman watched him carefully, noticing the sincerity in his eyes, the calm steadiness in his expression, and the thoughtfulness in his response. Finally, he spoke. "I cannot promise forever without understanding the journey we must take together," he said gently. "But I can promise honesty, respect, and that I will care for your heart as carefully as you have shown me to care for mine. If we walk this path together, step by step, I believe we can find a bond that is true and lasting." Her heart fluttered at his words. They were not the simple, instant answer she had hoped for, but they were more meaningful than any immediate declaration could be. There was wisdom in his response, a recognition that love was not just about feelings, but about commitment, trust, and the willingness to grow together over time. She realized that his honesty was a sign of respect, not hesitation, and that true connection required patience and understanding, not just words spoken in the heat of the moment. They spent the night walking along the riverbank, speaking quietly about their hopes, fears, and dreams. They shared their thoughts about family, tradition, and the future, discovering that their values aligned in ways that brought comfort and understanding. She realized that love was not just an emotion, it was a choice, a careful decision to honor one another's hearts while respecting the world they each came from. The young woman also noticed how her feelings had matured. She was no longer swept away by excitement or infatuation alone. She had learned to balance hope with caution, desire with wisdom, and passion with patience. The night became a mirror for her own growth, reflecting the strength and courage she had cultivated over weeks of careful observation, reflection, and quiet connection. As the hours passed, they paused by a small clearing near the river, the moonlight casting a gentle glow over the landscape. She looked at him and felt a deep sense of clarity. The question she had asked, and the answer he had given, had brought more understanding than she had expected. She realized that the bond they were forming was not just about immediate closeness. It was about respect, trust, and the willingness to build something enduring together. The young man spoke again, this time about his intentions for the future. He expressed a desire to learn more about her people, their traditions, and the ways in which they valued family and community. He spoke about the importance of understanding one another fully, of honoring both hearts while respecting the world they came from. She listened, impressed by his thoughtfulness and sincerity, and felt a growing confidence in the path they were beginning to walk together. They continued to talk late into the night, sharing stories, hopes, and reflections. She realized that the night itself had become a turning point, a moment of honesty, clarity, and growth. It was no longer just about questions or doubts. It was about understanding, respect, and the careful building of trust. She felt a sense of peace that had been missing in previous days, a quiet certainty that they could navigate the challenges ahead with patience, courage, and mutual care. As the first light of dawn began to appear on the horizon, she felt a sense of completion for this chapter of her journey. The night had been a test of courage, a moment to confront fears and hopes, and an opportunity to discover the truth in both their hearts. She understood that love was not something to be demanded or rushed. It was something to be nurtured, honored, and respected. And she felt ready to continue this journey, knowing that the path would not always be easy, but that it was worth taking for the sake of honesty, trust, and connection. In the days that followed, the young woman reflected on the night they had shared. She realized that the experience had changed her perspective on relationships, trust, and love. She understood that true connection required patience, honesty, and a willingness to navigate uncertainty together. She felt more confident in her ability to balance her heart and her duties, and she recognized that the journey toward lasting love was not a single moment, but a series of choices, reflections, and shared experiences. The young Apache woman also noticed how her community had begun to observe subtle changes in her demeanor. She walked with a quiet confidence, spoke with measured thoughtfulness, and carried herself with a sense of purpose that had grown stronger in the nights of reflection and connection. She realized that her journey was not just about her own heart, but about the lessons she could carry forward for others, lessons about patience, understanding, and the importance of respecting both oneself and those one cared for deeply. She knew that the path ahead would not be simple. Challenges would arise, and doubts would test her courage. But she also knew that the foundation of trust and understanding they had begun to build would guide them through difficulties. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the night of honesty, the shared reflections, and the careful cultivation of respect and connection. It had become a turning point, not just for her feelings, but for her understanding of what it meant to love and to be loved. And so, the young Apache woman moved forward, carrying the lessons of that night with her. She understood that love was not a single moment, a fleeting declaration, or a simple promise. It was an ongoing journey, built with care, patience, and mutual respect. She felt ready to walk this path, to explore the possibilities of connection and trust, and to discover the depth of her own courage, wisdom, and heart. As the sun rose over the mountains, painting the world in shades of gold and pink, she felt a quiet determination. She knew that challenges would come, but she also knew that love, honesty, and respect could guide her through them. The night of decision had passed, but its lessons remained. A quiet reminder that true connection was built on trust, patience, and the willingness to grow together. And in that knowledge, she found strength, hope, and the courage to continue the journey, step by step, heart open and aware of the possibilities that lay ahead. The days after that night were quiet, but the young Apache woman felt a subtle shift in her world. She noticed how every step she took, every glance she gave, seemed heavier with thought, weighed with meaning. The connection she shared with the young man had grown, yet it brought new questions and responsibilities. She realized that choices, once made, carried consequences not only for her heart, but also for the lives and expectations of those around her. Love, she discovered, was never just about feelings. It was about the balance between desire and duty, hope and reality. At first, everything seemed peaceful. The young man continued to show care and respect in the simplest ways. He helped with chores, joined her during quiet walks, and listened attentively to her stories. He did not demand attention or declare grand promises. Instead, he offered consistency, patience, and understanding. These small, steady actions reassured her, deepening the trust that had begun to blossom between them. Yet, with reassurance came new doubts. She wondered whether trust could truly endure challenges, misunderstandings, and the opinions of others. Could someone remain devoted when the world around them tested their intentions? Her family noticed subtle changes in her behavior. She smiled more often, seemed lighter in spirit, yet her eyes carried a seriousness that had not been there before. Her parents were proud of her maturity but could sense that something weighed on her mind. The young woman realized that the bond she shared with the young man was not only her own concern. It touched her family, her community, and the traditions she had grown up honoring. She found herself navigating an invisible line, honoring her heart while respecting the rules and expectations of her people. One morning, she accompanied her mother to gather herbs along the riverbank. The sun was warm, and the air smelled of earth and flowers. Her mother noticed her thoughtful expression and asked gently, "What is on your mind, my daughter?" The young woman hesitated. She did not want to reveal too much, for fear of worrying her mother or breaking the trust of her family. Yet she also understood that some honesty was necessary. That part of growing meant sharing her thoughts with those who loved her. "I am learning about trust," she said finally, "and about patience. I want to make the right choices for myself and for those I care about." Her mother listened quietly, nodding. She understood the importance of letting her daughter find her own way while offering guidance when needed. "Trust is like the river," her mother said softly. "It flows and bends, it carries strength, and it can also wear down obstacles over time. But it must be guided, respected, and nurtured. Your heart will tell you when it is ready, and your mind will help you walk wisely. Both are important." The young woman reflected on these words as they continued gathering herbs, feeling the wisdom of generations flow through her and strengthen her resolve. Despite her care, the young woman could not escape the reality that the bond she shared with the young man had consequences. Some in the village began to whisper, curious about the closeness she shared with someone not from their people. While their attention was not harmful, it reminded her that her actions were visible, and that appearances mattered as much as intentions. She realized that love was not just private, it carried social weight, affecting her standing within her community and testing the balance between personal happiness and collective expectations. One afternoon, a small disagreement arose between the young woman and the young man. It was minor, a misunderstanding about a shared task, but it revealed how fragile trust could sometimes be. For the first time, she felt the fear she had worked so hard to control. Could he misunderstand her intentions? Could a single moment of frustration unravel the bond they had carefully built? She took a deep breath and reminded herself of the lessons she had learned about patience, honesty, and communication. She spoke calmly, expressing her thoughts clearly, and he listened attentively, apologizing for his misunderstanding. In that moment, she realized that challenges were not threats, they were opportunities to strengthen trust. As days turned into weeks, the young woman faced new internal challenges. She wondered whether the young man's commitment would endure the tests of time. Could he respect her values if disagreements arose? Could he honor her people's traditions, even when they differed from his own? These questions weighed on her heart, but they also reminded her of the importance of observation, reflection, and careful judgment. Love was not blind, she realized. It required seeing clearly, understanding deeply, and acting thoughtfully. The young man, too, faced his own challenges. He observed the young woman's world with respect and care, learning about her traditions, her family, and her responsibilities. He understood that love was not about instant gratification or fleeting pleasure. It was about dedication, patience, and mutual growth. He spoke to her often about his intentions, offering reassurance without pressure. "I am here for the journey," he told her one evening as they walked under the stars. "I do not promise perfection, but I promise my honesty, my respect, and my willingness to grow with you." These words grounded her, giving her the courage to trust, even in uncertainty. Yet the young woman knew that trust alone was not enough. She also had to understand her own heart, to acknowledge her fears, hopes, and limitations. She spent quiet moments alone, reflecting by the river, observing the sky, and contemplating the future. She realized that love required balance, the balance of heart and mind, desire and duty, hope and wisdom. She understood that while the bond they shared was growing stronger, it would face trials, and that enduring love required both courage and prudence. One day, a minor crisis in the village tested their connection. A sudden storm damaged crops, and families struggled to recover. The young woman and the young man worked together, helping neighbors, offering hands where needed, and supporting one another through the hard work. In the shared effort, they discovered strengths in each other that had not yet been revealed. She saw his determination, kindness, and resilience, and he saw her courage, patience, and ability to lead without commanding. Through the storm, they realized that love was strengthened not just in peaceful moments, but in the challenges they faced together. By the time the crisis passed, the young woman had learned an essential truth: love and trust were not simple or guaranteed. They required commitment, patience, understanding, and effort. They demanded honesty in thought and action, respect for differences, and courage in the face of uncertainty. She also realized that mistakes and disagreements were not failures. They were opportunities to deepen understanding, to learn more about one another, and to strengthen the bond they had begun to build. The young woman also began to reflect on her own growth. She had changed from the girl who once watched the world with curiosity and hesitation. She had become a young woman who understood the complexities of the heart, the value of patience, and the importance of wisdom in decisions of trust and love. She recognized that the connection she shared with the young man was not just about affection. It was about shared values, mutual respect, and a willingness to face life's challenges together. As the weeks turned into months, the young woman understood that the consequences of love extended beyond herself. She recognized the responsibility she carried, not just for her own heart, but for the trust of her community, the respect of her family, and the legacy of her people. She realized that love, when nurtured with care, honesty, and understanding, could become a source of strength, guidance, and joy. But it required vigilance, courage, and a constant awareness of both the heart and the world around her. The young man, too, demonstrated growth. He learned the importance of consistency, patience, and respect. He understood that a lasting bond was built through steady, deliberate actions, not fleeting words or fleeting promises. He observed the young woman's guidance, listened to her concerns, and honored her perspective, showing that he was committed not just to her feelings, but to her values and the life she held dear. Their relationship was no longer simple attraction. It had become a careful weaving of hearts, values, and intentions. In quiet moments, the young woman reflected on the journey so far. She realized that love was not a single moment, a dramatic declaration, or a fleeting experience. It was a path, a series of choices and actions, reflections and decisions. She understood that the consequences of love were real, that trust could be tested, and that commitment required courage. And yet, she felt hope, strengthened by the knowledge that their bond was rooted in honesty, respect, and the willingness to grow together. As the sun set over the mountains one evening, casting golden light over the village, she felt a sense of peace amidst the challenges. The journey was not over, and the path ahead would test her and the young man in ways she could not yet imagine. But she had learned to face consequences with wisdom, to trust with discernment, and to love with courage. She had discovered that true love was not free of responsibility, it was built upon it. And so, the young Apache woman continued forward, her heart stronger, her mind wiser, and her spirit prepared for the journey ahead. She understood that consequences were not punishments, but lessons. She knew that challenges would arise, misunderstandings would occur, and doubts would test their bond. Yet she also knew that with honesty, patience, and respect, they could navigate the obstacles together, and that love, when nurtured with care, could endure the trials of life and grow into something lasting and meaningful. Years passed, and the young Apache woman had grown into a woman of quiet strength and wisdom. The experiences of her youth, the lessons learned, the questions asked, and the bonds formed had shaped her in ways she could never have imagined. The connection she had shared with the young man had evolved over time, tested by challenges, strengthened by patience, and nurtured through understanding. Their relationship was no longer simply a secret or a question of desire. It had become a testament to trust, respect, and the careful cultivation of love. She often reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. She remembered the first moments of curiosity, the quiet walks along the river, the shared silences that had spoken louder than words. She remembered the night she had asked the question that had been growing in her heart. "If I please you tonight, will you make me yours forever?" It had been a moment of vulnerability, courage, and hope, and the response she received had taught her the value of honesty, patience, and mutual respect. That night had changed everything. It had marked the beginning of a journey that had tested her, challenged her, and ultimately strengthened her. Over the years, she had come to understand that love was not simply about passion or desire. It was about consistency, commitment, and the willingness to face life's challenges together. The young man had remained by her side through difficult times, through moments of doubt, and through the expectations of their community. He had learned to respect her values, honor her traditions, and support her growth, just as she had learned to trust him and honor his integrity. Together, they had discovered that true connection required effort, patience, and courage. The young woman had also learned to navigate the balance between her personal happiness and her responsibilities to her community. She had grown to understand that love did not exist in isolation. It carried consequences, affected others, and required careful consideration. She had faced the whispers of the village, the subtle judgments of elders, and the curiosity of peers. Yet, she had learned to respond with dignity, patience, and understanding, demonstrating that a woman could honor her heart while respecting the world around her. Over time, their bond became a source of strength for both of them. They celebrated small victories together, shared quiet moments of reflection, and supported one another in times of hardship. She discovered that love was not always dramatic or loud. It was often found in the steady presence of someone who cared deeply, in the small gestures that showed respect and understanding, and in the willingness to walk life's path side by side. Through these experiences, she grew confident in her ability to love wisely, to trust deeply, and to maintain her own sense of self within a shared journey. One day, as she walked along the familiar riverbank, now stronger and more assured than the young woman she had once been, she reflected on the secret she had carried for so many years. That question, once whispered in hope and uncertainty, had guided her through the complexities of trust, commitment, and personal growth. It had been a question that demanded honesty, patience, and courage, not only from the young man but from herself. And though the words had been spoken long ago, the lessons they carried remained with her, shaping her understanding of love and life. She realized that the true secret was not the question itself, but what it represented: the courage to seek clarity, the wisdom to recognize sincerity, and the strength to honor both her heart and her values. She had learned that forever could not be begged for or demanded. It had to be earned, nurtured, and respected. She had discovered that love was most meaningful when it was a shared journey, built on trust, understanding, and mutual care. And in that realization, she found peace, confidence, and a sense of fulfillment. The young woman also observed how her own growth had influenced those around her. Younger women in the village looked to her with admiration, seeing in her an example of patience, wisdom, and strength. She shared her experiences through stories, not as instructions, but as lessons that could guide others in navigating the complexities of relationships, trust, and personal growth. She became a quiet teacher, a source of guidance, and a living example of how love, respect, and courage could coexist in harmony with tradition and responsibility. The young man, too, had grown through their journey. He had learned that love required more than feelings. It required respect, patience, and a deep understanding of the values of the one he cared for. He had learned to listen, to support, and to walk alongside the young woman in a partnership that honored both of them. Together, they discovered that enduring love was not about possession or control, but about mutual respect, shared responsibility, and the willingness to grow together. In her reflections, the young woman realized that every challenge they had faced, the minor disagreements, the misunderstandings, the doubts, and the external pressures, had strengthened their bond. Each obstacle had been an opportunity to deepen trust, clarify intentions, and understand the true meaning of commitment. She had learned that love was not static. It required ongoing attention, effort, and reflection. And in this understanding, she found a profound sense of satisfaction and fulfillment. As she looked to the future, she felt hope, confidence, and a quiet excitement. She understood that life would continue to bring challenges, that the path of love and trust would not always be easy, and that maintaining a strong bond required ongoing care and consideration. Yet she also knew that they were prepared, that their relationship had been built on a foundation of honesty, respect, and patience, and that they had the wisdom and courage to navigate whatever lay ahead. The young woman reflected on the secret she had once held, the question of forever, whispered in hope and uncertainty. She realized that it had been a gift, a guiding light that had taught her courage, patience, and discernment. It had led her to understand that love was not about possession, fleeting emotions, or momentary desire. It was about shared journeys, mutual respect, and the careful cultivation of trust and understanding. That secret had shaped her, guided her, and ultimately allowed her to experience a bond that was genuine, enduring, and meaningful. And though the secret remained within her heart, she no longer carried it as a question of doubt or fear. She carried it as a reminder of the lessons learned, the growth achieved, and the love nurtured. It was a quiet strength, a hidden treasure that informed her decisions, guided her actions, and reminded her of the courage required to love wisely. She understood that some secrets were not meant to be spoken aloud, but to be honored, respected, and carried forward with grace. As the sun rose over the mountains, casting warm light over the village and the river that had witnessed so many moments of reflection and growth, the young woman felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had faced the uncertainties of the heart, navigated the challenges of trust and commitment, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. She understood that life, like the river, was ever moving, carrying lessons, challenges, and opportunities for growth. And she was ready to face each new day with courage, wisdom, and an open heart. In the years that followed, she shared her experiences quietly, offering guidance, patience, and understanding to those who sought it. She became a living example of how a young woman could navigate love, trust, and tradition with grace, courage, and wisdom. The bond she had nurtured with the young man continued to grow, strengthened by patience, mutual respect, and shared commitment. And though the secret she once held remained within her, it became a symbol of her strength, growth, and the enduring lessons of a life lived with honesty, courage, and love. Finally, she understood that love, trust, and life itself were journeys, not destinations. She knew that every choice, every challenge, and every moment of patience had shaped her into the woman she had become. And as she looked toward the horizon, the river flowing gently beside her, she felt a sense of peace, fulfillment, and quiet joy. The secret she had carried so carefully had taught her the most important lesson of all, that true love is built on respect, honesty, patience, and the courage to grow together, step by step, heart by heart. And in that understanding, the young Apache woman found a quiet happiness that could not be shaken, a happiness born not from answers spoken aloud, but from the wisdom, strength, and love she had cultivated through a lifetime of thoughtful choices, careful reflection, and unwavering courage.